The story begins the way most disappearances do, with excitement, not fear. In the spring of 2018, 5 documentary filmmakers arrived in southwestern Colorado, chasing light to the fold of the San Juan Mountains. They were young, accomplished, and a little desperate to prove themselves. The footage they hoped to capture, untouched wilderness, ecological fragility, and the quiet resilience of alpine life, would become the cornerstone of a new environmental series titled The Living Earth. At its center was Ethan Vale, the project's director, 32, restless, and brilliant in a way that makes collaboration both magnetic and unbearable. Ethan had built his reputation on visual purity, one man's devotion to truth through the lens. But this time, his ambitions reached deeper. He wanted to film nature without interference. No guides, no backup crew, no corporate oversight. A self-sufficient expedition, pure documentation, pure risk. Alongside him was Mara Ellison, the cinematographer. Her footage was known for empathy, the kind that lingered on details others missed. Frost-catching eyelashes, the tremor of a bird's wing before flight. Mara didn't just record the world. She listened to it. She had followed Ethan since film school, bound by a mixture of admiration and concern. Where Ethan saw perfection, she saw the cost of reaching it. Noah Carr, the sound technician, joined because silence fascinated him. A former physics student, he claimed every environment had a signature frequency that if you listened closely enough, you could hear a landscape's memory. His gear was custom-built, his notes meticulous. Yet behind that methodical calm was someone haunted by data, numbers that couldn't explain why people vanished in remote places. Dr. Lila Moreau provided the science. A field ecologist and professor from the University of Denver. She was recruited for authenticity, but also because she believed the film could reshape public understanding of fragile mountain ecosystems. She had spent years cataloging flora that survived fire, drought, and mining scars. But she was not naive. She'd seen what isolation did to minds, even trained ones. Her husband, David Moreau, had insisted she take a satellite beacon. She packed it, but never said where. And finally, Owen Richter, the logistics coordinator, quiet, reliable, ex-military. He was a group structure, the one who knew how to ration food, maintain calm, and read weather better than most forecasts. He wasn't there for art or science. He was there to keep them alive. Together, they represented a perfect balance. Vision, empathy, logic, science, and discipline. A unit that should have thrived. But before they even set foot on the trail, there was another name tied to their journey. One the later documentaries would linger on. Dr. Walter Grange. Corporate ecologist, funder, and quiet manipulator. It was his foundation that financed the Living Earth. Grange had promised independence, but in private he spoke of results. Data he could present to investors hungry for greenwashing. Ethan didn't see it, or didn't want to. For Grange, the San Juans weren't just wilderness. They were an opportunity. On May 4th, 2018, the team left the nearest access road, their packs heavy with equipment and optimism. They filmed each other laughing at the trailhead sign. Entering the San Juan wilderness, no vehicles beyond this point. That shot, 5 people framed against endless pines, will become the photograph used on every missing persons poster 6 years later. The first week unfolded like the opening of a dream. The air was thin and sharp, scented with pine resin and snowmelt. Days bled into each other through footage. Mara's lens following marmots across rock, Lila's voice describing alpine succession, Noah crouched beside a creek recording its rhythm. Ethan's narration floated over it all, idealistic, almost sermon-like. He called nature a mirror we refuse to face. By the 10th day, their base camp sat beside a valley rim locals called Marin Basin, a broad bowl of forest and mist reachable only by foot. It wasn't on most maps. The GPS signal faded there, and the ranger stations were miles away. But Ethan was convinced it was the last untouched corridor wilderness left in the region. If we can film life here, he said on camera, we can show the world what still exists before it's gone. The footage recovered years later would show their early harmony. Shared meals, campfire debates, a group alive with purpose. But off camera, the cracks were forming. Lila worried about exposure. They had stretched supplies thinner than planned, assuming the valley would be easy to cross. Owen urged to check in, but Ethan refused. Every trip he'd taken under oversight ended with interference. He wanted silence, autonomy, proof that human resilience could coexist with nature's indifference. Noah began logging irregularities in the sound files, low-frequency distortions, like wind moving through something hollow. He assumed it was geological resonance, not the humankind. Then came the first argument. It began with fuel. They'd burned through 2/3 of their reserves by day 14. Owen suggested turning back to restock. Ethan said no. We didn't come to make compromises. We came to make history. Mara filmed the exchange. You can hear her breathing in the background, slow, uncertain, as if she already knew the line had been crossed. Later that night, Lila recorded a private journal entry. The tape was found in her pack years later, warped but playable. I keep reminding myself, this place isn't alive or dead. It just is. But Ethan's starting to believe it's personal, like the mountains listening. Maybe it is, just not in the way he thinks. After that, the tone of their footage changed. Less laughter, more distance. Ethan stopped appearing in front of the camera altogether, preferring voiceovers from the tent. Mara's lens grew observational, documenting exhaustion, not wonder. Day 18. Noah logged their last radio call. Static swallowed half of it, but one phrase was clear. Owen's voice saying, "We're past the ridge." Visibility dropping. Shouldn't stay here long. That was the final confirmed communication from the Living Earth expedition. When the search began weeks later, the ranger reports described weather turning fast. Sudden storms, landslides, rivers swollen from meltwater. No distress beacons were activated. No footprints beyond Marin Basin were ever found. For 6 years, nothing. Until the summer of 2024, when Ranger Bethany Klein led a fire risk survey through a remote drainage west of the basin. She noticed torn nylon caught in a branch. Sun-bleached, nearly fused with the bark. Below it, half buried under moss, was a rusted camp stove and a single camera lens. When investigators followed the coordinates, they found what remained of the camp. Cooking pots arranged neatly beside an extinguished fire pit. 2 tents collapsed inward. A field journal sealed in a weatherproof bag. And scattered among the roots, fragments of film stock too degraded to play. Bethany's report closed with a single line. It appears they left everything behind. But something or someone didn't let them go far. When they entered the basin, it was like crossing a border into another kind of silence. The sound changed first. Noah noted in his log. Wind here doesn't travel the same way. It falls instead of moves. The group laughed when he said it, but his voice on the recovered tape carried no humor. He wasn't describing awe. He was describing pressure, the sense that something vast was pressing down, not above them, but from within. The trail into Marin Basin narrowed to little more than animal tracks. Dense spruce rose like spires, blotting out the sky until noon felt like dusk. The farther they went, the more the temperature dropped. Lila remarked that the microclimate seemed unnaturally preserved, the kind of ecosystem that evolves only in isolation. But isolation wasn't just a scientific term anymore. It was beginning to feel like a presence. Ethan's obsession intensified. Every scene was wrong, too ordinary. He demanded reshoots, repositioned Mara endlessly, insisting the light could be truer. He started speaking in absolutes, purity, permanence, legacy. The others called it director mode, but privately, they began avoiding him. You can see it in the recovered footage. Wide shots that keep Ethan at a distance, as if even the camera had grown wary. Owen grew anxious about their fuel and rations. Their maps were outdated, and the terrain didn't match the satellite imagery they'd studied. Streams had shifted, slopes eroded. Lila tried to reason with Ethan. Nature's unpredictability was part of the story, but he refused. We're not here to document unpredictability, he said. We're here to show truth. That word, truth, will become poisonous. On day 20, the first storm hit. The tents held, but their storage canopy collapsed, soaking half their dry rations. Owen wanted to backtrack, to higher ground. Ethan insisted they stay. We have footage worth freezing for, he said, staring through the viewfinder even as sleep began to fall. That night, the camera recorded him sitting alone by the fire, unmoving, lens aimed into the darkness. When Mara asked what he saw, his reply was quiet but certain: evidence. The others stopped asking what he meant. 2 days later, Lila's field journal shifted from scientific notes to observation of behavior. Her handwriting trembled slightly, as if written through cold or restraint. Ethan's energy has changed. He's quieter now. Watches everyone like he's filming even when the camera's off. Owen barely sleeps. Noah stopped logging data. Says the mics are picking up interference. I told him it's wind or thermal echo. I don't think I believe it. Mara kept filming, though her footage grew erratic. Faces in half-light, hands trembling, the dull glow of headlamps against fog. What stood out most wasn't fear, but fatigue. You could almost feel the morale rot on screen, the invisible corrosion of trust. Then, one morning, the trail cameras they'd set around the perimeter were gone. Not stolen. Unmounted, neatly stacked near the fire pit. Noah discovered them and assumed Ethan had retrieved them for analysis. But Ethan denied it. Why would I waste time moving cameras? He said. But when he checked the SD cards, every one of them had been wiped. Only blank data remained. No signs of damage, just erasure. From that moment, something between them shifted irreversibly. Owen accused Ethan of covering his tracks. Lila tried to mediate, saying maybe condensation had corrupted the cards, but Noah cut in, condensation doesn't organize tripods. His calm tone made it worse. They argued for hours, voices muffled by the forest. That night, Owen volunteered to take first watch. They groaned paranoid, hearing footsteps in the underbrush, the usual tricks of wind and distance. But when morning came, Owen's logbook was missing. They found it later, 30 feet from camp, buried under pine needles. The final entry was one line. Someone's walking the ridge again. Not Ethan. They wanted to believe it was a joke. None of them said it aloud, but each of them began carrying their gear closer at night. Lila noticed Noah sleeping with the shotgun across his chest. Ethan stopped filming the others entirely. His lens turned outward, endless footage of tree leans, valley shadows, and fog creeping across ridges. To anyone else, it would have looked like landscape B-roll. But to him, it was evidence of something being watched. When Mara confronted him, he just said, "You'll see it when you look back at the tapes." By day 25, food was scarce. The valley's isolation had erased all sense of direction. The compass spun erratically, though later analysis showed nothing magnetic in the area strong enough to cause interference. Noah, the rational one, began talking less. He stared at his audio recorder for long stretches, headphones pressed tight. When Lila asked what he heard, he said only movement, but slow, like breathing through soil. It wasn't supernatural. It was human pattern recognition breaking under pressure, the mind building rhythm out of chaos. But that didn't make it less real. In one recovered audio file, you can hear Mara whispering to herself while filming the firelight. "We're running out of reasons to stay, but he won't let us leave." Ethan had changed by then. The others had stopped calling him by name. They called him the director, like it was a title separate from the person. He kept revisiting an outcropping above the basin, sometimes gone for hours. When he returned, his face would be streaked with dirt, his eyes dilated. He refused to say what he was doing. Later investigation found fragments of their map at that same outcropping, torn, reassembled, then torn again. It was as though someone had been trying to remove all exits. On day 28, Noah recorded the last intact entry on his sound log. "There's another fire down valley. Small, blue smoke. We thought it was reflection at first, but it's too steady. Someone else is here." That line would be verified years later by satellite weather data. Faint smoke detected near Marin Basin the same night, roughly 2 miles from the filmmaker's position. It was real. The next morning, their campfire was cold. The camera shows Mara's lens fogging as she pans to camp. Tents half-packed. Ethan missing. Lila calling his name into the mist. They found him an hour later near the creek, sitting in the water, fully dressed, camera still in hand. When Owen reached for him, Ethan looked up and said, We can't go yet. We're not alone. He wasn't delusional, not in a clinical sense. But the boundary between observation and obsession had collapsed. What he meant by not alone would never be known. That night, they held a vote. It was simple, stay or leave. The footage ends before the results are spoken, but Lila's journal filled the gap. 3 for leaving, 2 for staying. Ethan's camera still rolling. He didn't argue, just stared at us like we betrayed him. By dawn, Owen was gone. His pack remained, his knife gone, his footprints leading downslope toward the ridge. They searched until afternoon, calling until their voices broke. When they returned, Ethan was sitting by the fire again, motionless. Lila approached him slowly, the way you would approach an injured animal. "Ethan," she said, "we need to go." He turned, and for a moment his expression wasn't anger or confusion. It was relief. "Then film this," he said softly, "because this is where it ends." The footage cuts there. When search teams later analyzed the timeline, they estimated that was day 29, the midpoint between their last confirmed radio call and the day the first major storm swept through the basin. Forensic experts found no signs of animal attack, no evidence of a fall or struggle, just a camp that seemed paused mid-decision, as if the people inside had vanished in agreement. But one thing did survive, buried in the soil near the fire pit, a lens cap etched with words in shaky handwriting. "Property of Amy." It was Mara's. When asked later why she might have written her initials on something so small, Ranger Bethany Klein only said, "Maybe she wanted to make sure someone would know they were here, because by then I think she already knew they wouldn't be found." Morning came without sound. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was worse than thunder, a vacuum, the kind of silence that presses against the skull, begging to be broken but never is. Mara Ellison was the first awake. Her hands were trembling as she unzipped the tent, half expecting to find the forest rearranged overnight. The air smelled of wet soil and pine resin. The fire pit was soaked through, a ring of blackened ash at its center. Ethan Vale's tent was empty. At first, that didn't mean anything. Ethan was known for sunrise scouting. He'd often vanished before dawn to film the light breaking over the ridges. But this time, his camera was still there, lenses packed neatly, batteries untouched. Mara stared at the tripod leaning against the rock, its legs splayed like an unfinished thought. Noah Carr emerged next, bleary-eyed, his voice hoarse from the cold. "He's not back." Mara shook her head. Owen Richter, ever the quiet one, was already checking the trail by the stream, boots sinking in the mud. He followed the tracks, one set of prints leading out from camp, none returning. The prints stopped abruptly at the riverbank, where the current had swollen during the storm. Dr. Lila Moreau joined them, pulling her jacket close, face pale with dread. He wouldn't cross in that. It's suicide. But Ethan Vale was nothing if not reckless in the pursuit of beauty. It was what made him magnetic and dangerous. They searched for him until noon. No sign, no gear missing. Just his notebook, left open in the tent. Inside were rough sketches of the valley coordinates and a sentence underlined twice. "There's something about the clearing. The trees don't grow right." The group's first argument started then. Noah insisted they follow the river downstream. Owen argued they should stay put in case Ethan returned. Lila was torn. Every ecological instinct told her not to split up, but every human one screamed that waiting might mean losing him forever. Mara stood silent, camera in hand, recording their debate with the same detachment she used for everything. The lens became her armor. By dusk, the air turned brittle with unease. They built another fire, smaller this time. No one spoke. The flame flickered in the wind, painting their faces in restless orange. When the first night without Ethan fell, none of them slept. The rain started again, softer now, whispering over the tents. Somewhere in the dark, a branch snapped. Lila sat up, flashlight in hand. "That's not wind," she whispered. Owen grabbed the hatchet from the gear pile, his breath shallow. Noah checked the radio. Still dead. Static hummed faintly, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Then, from beyond the firelight, a voice, faint, broken, carried on the wind. "Help, please." Mara's camera was rolling when they stepped toward the trees. The beam of Owen's flashlight caught nothing but mist and trunks. The voice came again, closer this time, lower. Not Ethan's voice. Something older, weaker. They stopped moving. The forest closed around them, absorbing the sound, twisting it into something unrecognizable. "Hello," Lila called out. Silence. They retreated to camp. No one spoke for the rest of the night. By morning, their food supply had been scattered. One of the storage bags torn open, its contents dragged into the brush. Footprints again, but wrong somehow. Bare. Deep. Ethan's boots were still in his tent. Noah tried to rationalize it. Could have been a bear. Lila countered. Then where the claw marks? Owen said nothing. Day 3 bled into day 4. The search became half-hearted, then ritualistic. They'd walk the perimeter, call his name, return defeated. The valley seemed to fold in on itself, distorting direction, swallowing landmarks. Even the light felt different, pale and metallic. Mara started filming less. Her footage grew erratic. Trembling shots of the stream, the outline of Owen's back as he stared into the distance, Lila scribbling notes she'd later tear out and burn. In one recording, Noah is seen pacing near the tents, muttering to himself. "We shouldn't have come this far in." He said it was safe, but he didn't know what he was doing. They all stopped saying Ethan's name out loud after that. On the 5th morning, Lila found something caught in the brush downstream. A piece of red fabric tangled around a branch. Ethan's jacket, torn clean through. No blood, no tracks, just the garment swaying gently in the current. When they returned to camp, the tents had been moved. Not destroyed, not looted, moved. Shifted several meters to the left. Neatly aligned as if someone had tried to reorganize the camp while they were gone. Every personal item was still there, except for Owen's knife. That night, the rain stopped for good. The air went still. No one spoke, no one recorded. The forest had taken something from each of them. Not just Ethan, but the thin thread of reason that kept them tied to one another. Mara watched Noah try to light another fire, his hands shaking too much to strike the flint. Lila sat across from him, hollow-eyed, whispering something under her breath that no one could make out. Owen was standing guard by the tree lean, staring at nothing. The silence deepened until it became unbearable. And when Mara turned off her camera for the first time since arriving, the screen captured one final reflection in the lens. A faint movement in the distance. A shape that shouldn't have been there. By the next morning, one more tent was empty. By the 6th day, reason had begun to rot like meat left out in the sun. What little they had of structure, the morning checks, the radio attempts, the ration schedule, all disintegrated quietly, without declaration. It was Owen Richter who first stopped speaking. His silence wasn't rebellion, it was retreat. He no longer looked toward the horizon when he walked the ridge. He kept his eyes on the ground, scanning the soil as if the earth itself were trying to say something. Mara Ellison noticed a change through the lens first. When she replayed her footage at night, she saw the subtle ways exhaustion reshaped them. Noah's jaw clenching between words, Lila's hands trembling as she tied her hair back, Owen's reflection in the metal canteen. Always slightly blurred, never fully visible. Ethan Vale's name had become a kind of poison. They didn't speak it, but it lingered in the pauses between every failed plan. His notebook sat in the center of the camp, pages warped from rain, as if daring someone to open again. No one did. The days had grown longer, unnaturally so. The sun seemed to drag its descent across the peaks, leaving the valley half-lit and heavy. At night, the cold was immediate, seeping through clothes, through skin, down into bone. They tried to leave on the 7th day. Lila insisted it was time. "We followed the ridge west until we hit the service road," she said, her voice thin, brittle from dehydration. "If we keep waiting, we'll start making mistakes." But Noah shook his head. "We don't even know which direction west is anymore. It's a mountain range, not a maze." Lila snapped back. "You're wrong," Owen muttered softly, staring into the trees. "It's both." They packed anyway. By noon, the slope had turned to shale, slick and unstable. The sound of shifting rock echoed through the valley like gunfire. Mara was last in line, balancing the tripod across her shoulder, every step feeling more uncertain. At one point, she stopped to film the ridge, not for documentation, but out of instinct. The footage would later show a faint figure in the tree line, unmoving, watching them descend. They reached a clearing by evening, flat ground surrounded by towering spruces. Lila's compass spun idly. The radio hissed and died again. It was there that Owen spoke for the first time in hours. "This isn't the way out." Noah exhaled sharply. "Then where the hell are we?" Owen didn't answer. He was looking past them, into the dark. That night, Mara didn't sleep. She sat outside her tent, camera resting on her lap, battery light blinking red. The forest around them was too still, as if holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled. A stream, maybe, or something heavier. She could hear Lila murmuring from inside her tent, her voice calm, rehearsed, the way people speak to ghosts they don't believe in but can't ignore. When dawn came, Owen was gone. His pack remained, his knife still missing. Only a small trail of disturbed moss led toward the ravine. Mara followed it for a few meters before stopping. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, just a faint impression of knees pressed into the soil, as though he'd knelt there for a long time. They called his name once, twice, then stopped. The decision to keep moving was made wordlessly. They left the camp half-assembled, taking only what they could carry. Lila was in front now, eyes fixed ahead, and Noah trailed behind her, muttering coordinates under his breath. Mara walked in the middle, camera pressed to her chest like a heartbeat. By afternoon, the terrain changed again. The valley constricted, trees closing in, roots curling across the trail like veins. The air felt heavy, metallic. Even the birds had gone silent. They passed a series of markers, stacked stones, arranged deliberately. Lila stopped at one, tracing the edge of a rock with her finger. "Someone made these recently," she said quietly. Noah crouched beside her. "Owen, or Ethan," she murmured. Mara filmed their faces as they argued. In the playback later, the microphone caught something faint beneath their voices. A second whisper, lower, drawn out, unrecognizable. By the time they found shelter, the sky had turned the color of smoke. They crawled into the hollow of a fallen tree, too exhausted to think. Lila clutched her notebook tight against her chest. Noah sat motionless, staring at his mud-streaked hands. "We're not lost," he said, almost himself. "We're just misplaced." Mara didn't respond. Her eyes drifted to the tree lean, where faint movement rippled through the branches, a shape slipping between shadows. Hours later, a storm began again, sudden and violent. They huddled together under the hollow trunk. Mara recorded intermittently, the lens fogging, the sound warped by wind. In one frame, lightning flashes across the valley, and for a fraction of a second, it illuminates something high on the ridge, a figure standing still, just at the edge of visibility. When the rain finally stopped, Noah was muttering again. His words blurred into nonsense, coordinates that led nowhere. Lila tried to steady him, but her patience was gone. "We're going to die out here," she said, voice cracking. "Do you understand that? He's not coming back. None of them are." Noah didn't argue. He just smiled faintly, as if the admission offered some strange relief. That night, Mara played back the last of her footage before the battery died. The screen flickered, showing fragments. The torn tents, Owen's boots left in the dirt, Ethan's jacket caught in the brush, and finally, her own reflection staring back at her through the lens. She whispered to herself, "We were supposed to show them how beautiful it was." Her voice broke. The final seconds of footage ended with a shaky pan across the camp, and in the far distance, among the pines, a dim glow. Not firelight, something smaller, flickering, moving, like the last signal from a dying world. The first thing Ranger Bethany Klein noticed was the silence, not the ordinary stillness of the high country, that rhythmic quiet broken by wind, the calls of jays, the distant echo of water, but an absence that felt deliberate, the kind of silence that swallows sound before it can reach your ears. Her boots sank slightly in the mud as she moved through the aspen grove, the early spring melt turning the soil into dark paste. The GPS marker blinked steadily on her wrist. Possible campsite. Unverified coordinates. It had come from a survey drone 2 weeks earlier. A glint caught on camera near a ravine wall. Nothing unusual, until someone magnified it and saw the corner of a tent. She had seen hundreds of abandoned camps before, but this one was different. When she reached the clearing, the light changed. A small valley opened between the trees, narrow, uneven, filled with a lattice of downed branches and moss-covered stones. And there it was, the camp. 3 tents collapsed inward, their fabric eaten through by years of weather. Rusted cooking gear. A tripod, still upright, though half buried. A broken camera lens reflecting the sky. Bethany crouched near the remnants, brushing dirt from a metal case. On its side, faint letters were still legible. Vail Research Expedition, 2018. Her throat tightened. She remembered the name. Everyone in the region did. The disappearance of Ethan Vail's team had haunted the department for years. Search after search had come up empty. No remains, no gear, no trace of where they'd gone after losing contact. The case had been officially closed in 2020, labeled undetermined environmental exposure. But as Bethany scanned the site, she knew this wasn't exposure. It was something else. The tents weren't destroyed by wind or snow. They were cut open, each one in the same way, long vertical slashes, as if someone had torn their way out from inside. She took photos methodically, keeping her breathing even. Then by the fire pit, she saw it, a small waterproof camera coated in grime, wedged under a stone. Its casing cracked, but the memory card slot still intact. Her gloved hands hesitated before touching it. She didn't know why. Maybe superstition, maybe the weight of 6 years of unanswered questions. But when she finally picked it up, it felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried more than just plastic and circuitry. The next day, inside the ranger station at Silverton, the footage began to play. It opened with Ethan Vail's voice. Calm, confident, full of the optimism that precedes disaster. He was filming a panoramic sweep of the valley, describing the project's intent: to document the regenerative patterns of alpine ecosystems after wildfire. His tone was professional, rehearsed, but his eyes betrayed something restless beneath the surface. The early clips were mundane. Lila Moreau taking soil samples, Noah Carr adjusting the audio equipment, Owen Richter checking their coordinates, Mara Ellison filming from a low angle, laughing when Ethan slipped on a rock. Normal people. Ordinary moments. The kind you never realize are the last until later. Bethany leaned closer to the screen as the footage shifted. The timestamps jumped days ahead. 6, then 8, then 11. The tone changed too. The laughter was gone. The lens shook more often. Conversations grew shorter. Background sounds increased. Wind, cracking branches, distant echoing. Then came the night recordings. Lila's voice whispered from the dark. There's someone out there. Owen saw him again near the ridge. Ethan's reply came quiet but steady. It's an animal. We've been over this. But the camera turned then, and in the grainy distance, 2 faint pinpricks of light shimmered between the trees. Unmoving. Bethany froze the frame. Enhanced it. The lights could have been anything, reflection, interference. But the stillness in them felt wrong. She resumed playback. The following clips grew chaotic. Arguments about direction. Disagreements about food. Owen refusing to return to camp one night. Lila's voice trembling as she read from her journal. If we make it out, this valley needs to stay untouched. It isn't safe. Then came the footage Mara must have recorded near the end. The image was blurry, handheld, rain streaking the lens. She was whispering to herself, the way people do when they know they won't be heard again. Ethan's gone, she said. Lila's hurt. I don't know where Noah went. I keep hearing footsteps around the tents, but they stop when I look. The camera tilted down to her lap, where she held the small audio recorder. The screen showed red, recording. In the background, something moved, faint and rhythmic, like a steady breath against the nylon walls. The footage ended there. Static. Bethany sat back in her chair, her pulse drumming in her ears. She'd seen hundreds of missing person cases. Hikers, hunters, tourists, but never something like this. The unease wasn't in what the footage showed. It was in what it didn't. She rewound, frame by frame, until she noticed something small, a reflection in the lens as Mara turned the camera toward herself. In the mirrored surface behind her, just over her shoulder, a second figure was faintly visible. No one had been with her when that clip was recorded. The silence of the station felt alive, then heavy, expectant. Bethany logged the footage into evidence and filed her preliminary report. But that night, when the rest of the team had gone home, she stayed. She kept watching, searching for patterns, anything that could make sense of what had happened in that valley 6 years ago. Near dawn, she reached the end of the recovered files. The screen flickered once, and a single corrupted clip loaded, untitled, undated. For 7 seconds, the image showed the same clearing she had visited. The tent still standing, the valley alive with summer light. Ethan Vale's voice whispered something almost too quiet to catch. Bethany turned up the volume. "I think someone's been here before us." Then the clip cut to black. Bethany sat alone, the faint hum of the station lights filling the room. Outside, the wind was rising again, the same wind that had erased their footprints 6 years before, carried with the echoes of voices never meant to be heard. And somewhere deep in the San Juan Mountains, the forest absorbed it all, indifferent, eternal. I still think about that place. The coordinates are burned into my memory. 37 degrees 54 minutes north, 107 degrees 42 minutes west, though we scrubbed them from every public record. Officially, the Vale Expedition site remains classified as restricted for ecological recovery. Unofficially, no one from the department goes near it anymore. When I found the camp that morning, I thought it would bring closure. I'd worked enough recovery cases to know what closure really meant. Bones, a cause of death, something you'd write on a form. But closure isn't a line in a report. It's a silence that follows a question you can't answer. We recovered what we could: gear, notebooks, samples. No bodies, not even partial remains. Forensics said the elements had likely taken everything. Maybe animals, maybe time. But something about the order of things at that site never fit. The tents were too symmetrical in their ruin, the scattered equipment arranged as though someone had cleaned up before leaving. I used to replay the footage on my computer late at night. Ethan Vale's voice, Mara Ellison's laughter, the sound of their boots in wet grass. Ordinary moments, made unbearable by what I knew was coming. They vanished in July of 2018. By August, snow had already started falling at that elevation. By September, their trail was gone. The official reconstruction says they lost direction after a communications failure, rationed food until exhaustion took over, then succumbed to exposure. But exposure doesn't explain the footprints we found a mile north of the camp. 3 distinct sets leading uphill, and a 4th trailing behind, smaller, erratic, as if stumbling. The tracks ended abruptly at a ridge wall. No slide marks, no drop. Just stopped. A geologist from the University of Colorado visited later that summer. He said the valley sits on a fault line, that sometimes soil shifts subtly enough to open and close cavities in rock, swallowing what stands above. He spoke about erosion, instability, natural processes, logical things. But logic only fills silence. It doesn't erase it. When the footage was cleaned up, a technician in Denver found something I'd missed. Near the end of the last clip, the one Mara filmed inside her tent, there's a faint voice beneath her whisper. It's low, distorted by wind, maybe just feedback. But when you isolate it, you can hear words. 3 of them. Don't follow him. We don't know who him was. Ethan Vale? Owen Richter? Someone else in that valley before them? I replayed that fragment so many times the cadence has memorized itself into my breathing. The camera records only what's visible. It doesn't capture intent or fear, or the way exhaustion makes people see meaning in shadows. That's what I tell myself. That's how I keep working. Last year, hikers found one of their name tags, a cracked plastic badge half buried in the screen near Lake Hope. The tag read Dr. Lila Moreau. The letters were faded, but the clasp still gleamed, untouched by rust. 6 years in alpine weather, and the metal was clean as if it had just been dropped. The lab called it an anomaly. I called it persistence. Every spring, snowmelt uncovers a little more of that valley. Each time I review the satellite scans, I expect to see something new, maybe another tent corner, another reflection. But the place stays the same, empty, overgrown, unremarkable to anyone who doesn't know what happened there. In the end, we built a small marker near the trailhead, just names carved into a sheet of reclaimed pine. Hikers sometimes leave stones there, or folded notes. Most don't know the story, just that something ended nearby. I visit once a year, early morning before the thaw. The forest sounds different then, thinner, almost tentative, like it remembers. I stand where the path divides, where the air turns colder, and I listen. People ask why I still work in search and rescue after that case. I tell them the truth, because disappearance is never final. You think someone's gone, but they linger, in footage, in echoes, in the way a place holds their absence. The wilderness doesn't take lives. It absorbs them. It waits until we stop looking. Sometimes, I think about the last line in Ethan's journal. It wasn't a reflection, not even a proper sentence. Just a fragment scrawled in pencil near the bottom of the page. The valley wants to remember itself. Maybe that's all this was, the land reclaiming memory in its own way, indifferent to the stories we try to tell about it. If you ever hike near the San Juan ridges and the wind goes quiet for no reason, you'll understand what I mean. It isn't fear. It's recognition. The earth taking a breath, listening for the ones who never came back. And in that silence, you'll hear it too. Not words, just the sound of a camera shutter, closing at last.